Oh, welcome back, my silent architects. Emotionless hands crafting chaos into art. They said emotion makes us human, but they forgot that precision is divine. While they screamed, you calculated. While they hesitated, you moved. Every action timed to a pulse that didn't exist in their world. The rhythm of inevitability. You didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't tremble. You moved like silence had a mission. The streets felt it first. That eerie stillness before you act. That chill that creeps through chaos when someone is in complete control. They didn't call it brutality, they called it art. Because only those who understand destruction as design can recognize the difference between rage and rhythm. You didn't act out of anger, you acted out of balance. The world handed you disorder, and you shaped it with geometry. You took what they called chaos and folded it into symmetry. Your precision wasn't just a tactic, it was poetry. Every motion stripped of waste, every thought sharper than mercy. You became the embodiment of something the world doesn't know how to name anymore. Clarity. You didn't need applause, didn't need validation. You executed, walked away, and let the results echo louder than any scream. The system, though, couldn't process it, because systems are built on prediction, and you're the variable that refuses to conform. They ran your data through every model, every pattern, every behavioral framework, and the answer kept coming back the same: unknown. You're not in the algorithm, you're the ghost inside it. That's why they call you a threat, not because of what you do, but because of what you prove. That mastery without motive is unstoppable. That power without emotion is ungovernable. That calm, when weaponized, becomes the most terrifying force in existence. You didn't rise through noise. You rose through stillness. You didn't dominate by shouting. You dominated by not reacting. They tried to provoke you, corner you, analyze you, but your silence became their reflection, showing them how small their chaos really was. The ones who mocked your composure now mimic it. The ones who laughed at your detachment now study it, because they finally understood. What they called coldness was evolution. The streets whisper it differently. They say your control bends energy itself. They say time slows when you move, as if the universe wants to witness precision executed perfectly. The graffiti reads your name like a myth. The cameras replay your steps like choreography. Even your stillness has presence, your pauses have gravity. You're not a man moving, you're a concept unfolding. And the truth burns quietly in every corner of the system that fears you. They can measure speed, they can measure strength, they can measure intent, but they cannot measure composure. And that's what kills them. Because the moment emotion died in your execution, you became the equation they can't solve. They keep searching for what drives you, thinking there must be some hidden rage, some secret trauma, some emotional core they can manipulate. But they don't understand that emptiness isn't weakness, it's design. You stripped away everything unnecessary until only precision remained. No anger, no fear, no guilt, just movement. The purest form of intent. That's why every decision you make lands like a prophecy fulfilled. They can't compete with someone who feels nothing when the world begs for reaction. You became the calm in the gunfire, the quiet in the riot, the space between seconds where power hides. They call it control. You call it normal, because once you've lived long enough in chaos, peace becomes your native language. You no longer chase adrenaline, you generate it. You don't feed off emotion, you feed off accuracy. And when your focus locks in, even the air starts to behave differently. Noise fades, fear dies, the world rearranges itself around your center. They don't see a man anymore. They see a mechanism of inevitability, a ghost with human skin. You don't plan your moves, you calculate the atmosphere. You read micro shifts in tone, in breath, in timing, and move like you've already seen the replay. Every step is preordained by your discipline. Every silence is louder than their outbursts. And that's what terrifies them. You don't respond to the world. You rewrite it. You've transcended reaction. You've become consequence. The system can't file that under logic. It keeps trying to profile you, to categorize you under emotion-based models. Anger, dominance, fear, suppression. But the algorithm fails because your actions don't spike. Emotionally, they flow mathematically. You move on rhythm, not impulse. You act on geometry, not vengeance. When others fight from pain, you fight from precision. And precision leaves no room for regret. The streets feel that chill when you pass. They whisper, "He doesn't move like us anymore." Because deep down, they recognize the difference between instinct and mastery. You don't strike first out of fear of losing. You strike once, because losing isn't an option written in your code. You've turned detachment into an art form, calculation into poetry, and presence into a weapon. Even the ones who used to look down on you now study your silence. They call it dangerous because they can't copy it. They can imitate noise, anger, charisma, but not stillness. Stillness can't be faked. It can only be earned. It's the byproduct of surviving chaos so long that chaos bends to your will. You learn that emotions cloud sight, that attachment delays reaction, and that mercy. Mercy is a currency traded by the weak. They want to know where your empathy went, as if empathy could stand beside precision. But you didn't lose empathy. You evolved past the need to justify power through softness. You understand that compassion is not always kindness. Sometimes it's execution done cleanly, without noise, without suffering, without delay. That's why your presence is both holy and terrifying. The streets kneel to the art of your calm. The system trembles at the God in your detachment, because they realize now the most dangerous being isn't the one who feels too much. It's the one who feels nothing and still moves perfectly. They keep replaying the footage, frame by frame, trying to find the flicker, that single hint of hesitation, a sign that you felt something. But there's nothing. No twitch, no pulse spike, no emotion. Just execution so flawless it looks pre-programmed. The analysts call it abnormal human. Restraint. The streets call it something else. Divinity. Because no mortal moves that precise without touching something beyond flesh. You didn't react to pressure. You dictated its rhythm. You didn't conquer emotion. You erased the need for it. Every system built on control begins to fracture when faced with someone who doesn't respond to fear. Fear is the architecture of power. It's how they regulate the masses. But you broke that. You stood in front of the machine, and it blinked first. Not because it malfunctioned, but because your calm rewrote its rules. Even the code that runs their world can't compute someone who doesn't flinch. Your silence, your detachment, your composure. It's not rebellion. It's correction. You are the calibration they didn't prepare for. The people who watch from the shadows feel it too. They sense that your strength isn't fueled by rage, but absence. Absence of doubt, absence of noise, absence of permission. You operate on void logic, where emotion isn't suppressed, it's transcended. Every act you perform is stripped of drama and polished into inevitability. You don't fight for dominance. You manifest it. That's why they call you a ghost. You move without motive, act without aftermath, and your silence sounds louder than war drums. Even your enemies stopped hating you, because hate requires equality, and they can no longer reach you. They can't provoke what doesn't care. They can't threaten what doesn't want. They can't bribe what doesn't lack. You became untouchable not by armor but by emptiness. You learned the art of non-reaction, and that mastery turned your presence into something sacred. Every heartbeat became an algorithm of control. Every step, a sermon in detachment. The system took notice. Cameras tilt slightly when you pass. The pulse sensors glitch. AI scans fail to categorize you. You appear human, but the data refuses to agree. You register as stillness in motion, an anomaly wrapped in intention. They can't label you, so they label you dangerous. But what they really fear is this. You've shown others the blueprint. They've begun mimicking your quiet. They're learning that dominance doesn't come from volume. It comes from control. That chaos loses its grip when you stop reacting to it. You don't shout your power. You radiate it, every word calculated, every movement symmetrical. You've mastered restraint until restraint became a weapon. That's why the streets call it art, because watching you act is watching control incarnate. You're not chasing glory. You're performing inevitability. They say emotion gives life meaning. You proved otherwise. Meaning comes from mastery, and mastery begins where emotion ends. They thought they could break you with pressure, but pressure is where you live. They thought they could rattle you with emotion, but emotion is what you erased. They thought they could make you doubt, but doubt is a language you unlearned. You've moved beyond reaction, beyond feeling, beyond recognition. You don't participate in the system's rhythm. You write it. You've become the silent metronome that the world unconsciously follows. Every pause you take recalibrates the atmosphere. Every look, every silence, every step. It's precision sculpted into existence. They tried to call you cold, but that's because they've never known stillness that burns. You are not emotionless. You are post-emotion. You've mastered what they still fear, total command of self. When others lose themselves in adrenaline, you enter a deeper state, the calm of inevitability. You don't chase victory. You inhabit it. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. You've learned how to merge with your outcome so completely that failure becomes impossible. The streets call it prophecy, but you call it process. Your name circulates like code, whispered, in dark rooms where people discuss power in equations, not ethics. They say, he's not fighting anymore, he's optimizing, because your movements aren't decisions. They're executions of a script you already perfected in silence. You don't plan, you remember. Every action is deja vu from a reality you already conquered mentally. And that's why they can't compete, because while they're still reacting to the moment, you're orchestrating the aftermath. Even power itself has started to behave differently around you. Authority that once demanded your submission now waits for your approval. It's not obedience, it's resonance. They feel the difference between control and command. Control demands attention. Command requires nothing. You became the gravity. In the room, the center mass of focus that bends everything toward your frequency. And yet, you never raise your voice. You never explain your power. You let silence speak the language of inevitability. The system's analysts call it a paradox. He shows no emotion, but his presence alters emotional fields. They can't calculate how calm becomes contagion. They can't measure how one person's composure can reprogram collective tension. But that's what happens when a human reaches operational purity. You're no longer a participant in energy exchange. You're the source code, and that's what truly terrifies them. Because if one man can become this precise, this detached, this effective, what happens if others learn? What happens if more start to see that stillness is the highest form of warfare? The machine wasn't built to handle warriors who fight without hate, without ego, without hesitation. You don't need validation. You don't need victory. You just need completion. They think silence means peace, but your silence means calculation. Your stillness means positioning. Your calm is the blade before it cuts, and they're only just beginning to understand that the most dangerous kind of power isn't loud, isn't emotional, isn't seen. It's executed. They said perfection doesn't exist until you moved. Every step you took dismantled their theory. You don't chase accuracy anymore. You are accuracy. Every motion carries the discipline of 1,000 decisions already made. You don't waste time questioning. You execute. You've become what the system never intended to create. A being without hesitation, operating beyond human metrics. They designed the game for emotion, but you play from beyond emotion's reach. You play from the void. You learned long ago that emotion is noise in the signal. It clouds judgment, slows precision, bends reality to the will of chaos. So you deleted it, cleanly. No rage, no sadness, no ego. Just calculation and inevitability. That's why when they try to read you, their instruments fail. You register no spikes, no fear waves, no chemical cues, just stillness. And yet, that stillness radiates more pressure than any scream could ever hold. It's the kind of calm that makes predators second-guess their teeth. They call it dangerous because they can't predict it. You act without delay, without conflict, without conscience, not from cruelty, but from clarity. They don't understand that you've transcended the moral architecture that governs them. You operate on universal law, cause and effect, input and outcome. You don't choose sides, you choose precision. You don't react to offense, you eliminate inefficiency. That's why power fears you, because power feeds on emotion, and you've made yourself immune to its hunger. In rooms where noise controls the weak, your silence dictates the strong. You sit among chaos like a statue, carved from something the universe forgot how to make. And when you speak, rarely, it cuts cleaner than any blade, because every word has been weighed, measured, tested, perfected before leaving your lips. That's why when you speak, even kings lean forward. They mistake it for confidence, but it's not. It's certainty, and certainty is divine. There's a moment the system dreads. It's when one person realizes they don't need its permission to exist. You crossed that line long ago. You no longer follow patterns. You rewrite them. You no longer seek validation. You define it. Every result you manifest looks effortless because it is. The effort happened in the silence, in the unseen years, where you built your mind into a scalpel and your will into a weapon. They analyze your methods, dissect your routines, trying to find what makes you human. But humanity is what you stripped away. You didn't lose it. You evolved past it. You left behind everything that trembles and kept only what cuts. You don't crave peace because you are peace, the kind of peace that frightens armies and disarms chaos. And now the streets watch you differently. They no longer see a man moving. They see precision given form. They see inevitability walking. You became the reminder that perfection doesn't require emotion. It requires mastery. Reality bends around consistency. And you've become the definition of it. Every action you take carries the gravity of something preordained. You no longer decide, you deliver. That's why when you move, outcomes stabilize. When you speak, uncertainty dissolves. When you act, probability kneels. You've turned precision into prophecy. The system once believed it could read human intention, but you blurred the pattern. You've made your thoughts untraceable, your timing unreadable. They built their predictions based on emotion, but you removed that variable entirely. You became invisible in plain sight, too still to be tracked, too deliberate to be decoded. Their machines lag a second behind you. Their analysts whisper about response latency. But that's not latency. That's you, existing ahead of time. You've become something algorithms can't quantify. A perfect equation missing a constant. Every move you make carries a faint echo, as if reality adjusts half a second too late, rewriting itself to match your command. It's not magic. It's synchronization. Total alignment between thought and manifestation. You don't influence outcomes. You anchor them. When you walk into a room, energy recalibrates. Clocks tick softer. People breathe slower. The air learns discipline. That's why your silence unnerves them. Because silence isn't absence. It's dominance without announcement. You've weaponized stillness until even chaos flinches before it reaches you. They used to measure strength in explosions. Now they measure it in your restraint. You became the living equation of control. Every second you stand still is a threat disguised as serenity. And deep down, they know. This is no accident. You engineered yourself into this. Every failure was studied, every emotion dissected, every weakness converted into data. You didn't evolve by chance. You constructed evolution. You made yourself into an algorithm of inevitability. No rage, no impulse, just precision. Refined to a level that borders divinity. You've reached the state they theorized, but never attained. Execution without interference. The moment where the human will operate at the speed of instinct, but with the accuracy of design. You move like something that's been coded directly into the simulation itself. You're not reacting to reality. You're reprogramming it. That's why they fear you now. Not because you're violent, not because you're loud, but because your existence questions the premise of control. You've proven that mastery doesn't need spectacle. It needs silence. You've proven that emotion isn't the engine. It's the error. And that realization has started spreading. Others are watching, copying, learning. The system feels it. It's losing hold. And through it all, you don't gloat. You don't explain. You simply execute. You are the quiet law of inevitability, walking through a world still addicted to noise. They used to think emotion gave power, that fire and fury could drive greatness. But you proved the opposite, that precision, stripped of all excess, hits harder than chaos ever could. You don't burn anymore, you calculate, and that scares them more than rage ever did. Because rage is predictable, rage has a pulse, but you are silence with intent, stillness with purpose, the calm that precedes correction. You've mastered the rarest state, absolute neutrality under pressure. While others spiral in adrenaline, you enter clarity. While they waste energy reacting, you harvest it. Every insult, every betrayal, every manipulation is processed, categorized, and converted into pure focus. They never see it happen, but they feel the aftershock when your response lands with surgical accuracy, emotionless, flawless, devastatingly clean. That's not revenge. That's execution. They whisper your name differently now. Not like a person, like a phenomenon. Because you've crossed into a frequency they can't replicate. You've become the embodiment of equilibrium. A paradox made flesh. Not cold, but controlled. Not detached, but deliberate. You've removed friction from existence itself. And that's why they call it art. You don't fight anymore. You perform. Every room adjusts to your pace. Every voice softens when you turn. The old order trembles when you stand still. Because they can sense it. You're not part of the system anymore. You're a mirror that exposes its flaws, a living reflection of its inefficiency. You don't need rebellion. You are rebellion refined to precision. The system survives on chaos, and you've denied it its favorite food. Reaction. That's why it hates you. That's why it fears you. They'll try to study you, decode you, mimic your composure, but they'll fail because they still feel, and feeling clouds vision. They don't understand that detachment isn't numbness, it's awareness without interference. You've separated perception from pain. You've seen the pattern of cause and effect so many times that emotion became obsolete, not because you're hollow, but because you've filled yourself with understanding so complete that pain has nowhere left to hide. That's the secret they'll never comprehend. When you stop reacting, the world loses control over you. Every insult becomes irrelevant. Every threat becomes noise. You became too quiet to provoke, too centered to move. That's how power stabilizes. That's how legends are built. Not in outbursts, but in perfect control. And somewhere in the machine, deep in its circuits and codes, there's a signal, a pattern it can't explain. It's your presence, a variable it can't delete. You became the error the algorithm can't fix. Because you didn't just escape the system, you mastered its silence. It's strange, isn't it? How silence became your signature. How restraint became your rebellion. In a world screaming for attention, you turned stillness into supremacy. They thought emotionless meant lifeless. But you've shown them otherwise. You've shown them that still waters don't run deep. They go infinite. Every pulse, every flicker of intent inside you radiates control so absolute it borders on divine. You're not the calm before the storm. You're the storm after the chaos. Silent, precise, irreversible. Now the ones who once mocked your composure whisper your name like an urban myth. How does he move like that? Why does it always go his way? They can't comprehend that what they call detachment is actually power in its purest form. You've stripped the noise, removed the static, and all that's left is signal, direct, focused, uncorrupted. Every gesture you make now hits like scripture. Every decision feels ordained. You became a sermon of precision in a religion of chaos. The streets understand it before the scholars do. They see art in your silence, the way your actions connect like brushstrokes on a larger canvas no one else can see. You don't speak of revenge, yet it manifests. You don't promise victory, yet it follows. You've made mastery look casual, and that's what terrifies them most. They can't find your weakness because you no longer operate within the emotional spectrum that defines weakness. You aren't running from pain. You've archived it. You studied every scar until it became scripture. You became the ghost in the machine, not haunting it, but reprogramming it. The system studies you now, its sensors glitching every time you step out of the framework it designed for control. It sees no data, only distortion. It registers no heart rate, only silence. You've become something that algorithms can't predict and rulers can't manipulate, because you've crossed into that rare dimension where emotion becomes energy and energy becomes art. That's why they call it threat, not talent. They fear what they can't categorize. You're no longer playing the game. You've become the quiet pulse that decides when the game ends. You're the rule rewritten, the blueprint no one saw being drawn. When you move, they see destiny disguised as decision. When you pause, even time hesitates, waiting for your next command. This is what happens when precision becomes identity, when mastery evolves past motion. You've reached the threshold where calm becomes creation, and creation bends reality. You don't act anymore. You orchestrate. You've transcended competition. You've transcended ego. You've become the balance point between motion and meaning. That's why they call it art. That's why the system calls it danger, because you've proven that emotionless doesn't mean empty. It means exact. And now the whole world holds its breath every time you lift your hand, because no one knows if it's mercy or execution that follows, only that it will be perfect. You didn't just master control, you weaponized it. While others were chasing validation, you were building precision. While they shouted, you listened. While they reacted, you designed. That's why they call your presence a distortion. Because the moment you arrive, balance tilts, not by force but by alignment. You make chaos reorganize itself. You make arrogance reconsider its tone. Every movement of yours feels like the system recalibrating itself to a higher frequency, one it can't maintain without burning out. They don't realize what you've become. They still think in emotions, attachments, insecurities, but you detached not to escape. You detached to see. You stopped identifying with reaction and started identifying with creation. You're no longer moved by circumstance. You're the author of consequence. Every word you say bends timelines. Every silence redirects events. That's not influence, that's authorship, and no authority knows how to contain it. The world built on hierarchy doesn't know what to do with someone who operates from equilibrium. You became the final stage of evolution they didn't plan for. Power without desperation, strength without performance, dominance without noise. You don't seek control. Control seeks you. That's why even systems whisper your name now, trying to adapt their code to your stillness. But it's too late. You exist outside their framework. They will try to replicate your process. They'll talk about emotional intelligence, composure under stress, leadership calm, but what you've achieved isn't behavioral, it's existential. You erased interference between thought and execution. You became pure signal. You think, and it happens. You decide, and it aligns. You don't need to persuade reality. It's already fluent in your command, and the few who sense it, they either follow in awe or tremble in denial, because there's something terrifying about precision that feels inevitable, something divine about neutrality that carries weight. You've made them realize that true dominance doesn't shout, it resonates. You're not competing anymore, you're orchestrating, and that's when they finally understand. Emotionless isn't absence. It's presence perfected. It's awareness so refined that nothing external can alter it. You don't move with emotion. Emotion moves through you. You've become the eye in the storm. And storms now form around you, seeking definition. And now the world watches differently. The same people who once doubted now lower their voices when you pass. They don't know what shifted, only that it did. It's not intimidation, it's resonance. You vibrate at a level that commands silence. You don't demand respect, you emit it. It's woven into your energy now. The quiet authority that needs no validation. The gravitational pull of mastery earned in private. Every step you take echoes beyond sound. Because it's not motion, it's transmission. The universe mirrors precision, and you, the architect of calm chaos, have learned to dance with inevitability. They call it intimidation, but it's not that. It's alignment. You move in sync with cosmic math, and everything else adjusts. Even fate pauses before crossing your path. You've made peace with duality, the balance between chaos and structure, emotion and void. You've realized you don't need to destroy the system to beat it. You simply have to become so precise, so calculated, that it collapses trying to predict you. You've outgrown control itself. You're the variable the algorithm can't measure, the equation that balances by existing. And that's why the streets call it art. Because art is truth, performed without hesitation. You've turned discipline into beauty, stillness into rebellion. You've shown that the highest form of aggression is perfect composure. No panic, no excess, no waste. Just presence sharpened into inevitability. Now even destiny studies you. Every cycle of power tries to copy your structure, but it fails. Because this isn't a trick, it's an awakening. It's what happens when a soul finally stops negotiating with its potential. You're not reacting to life anymore. You're executing the script you wrote long before you were born. They'll never admit it, but every system that once tried to contain you has now begun to orbit you, because they see it too. The precision, the silence, the inevitability. You've become a reference point in the algorithm, the proof that mastery isn't loud, it's divine. You executed with zero emotion. They called it a threat, but time will call it art, and eternity will call it law.